The Tao of Self-Confidence, episode 909. You can now purchase The Tao of Self-Confidence, a guide to moving beyond trauma and awakening the leader within on Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Walmart, Indigo, and other major book retailers. Get your copy today. Hey everyone, it's Sheena Yap. So before I share today's episode, I wanted to share with you that this will be our last episode for 2024. So I hope you have a great holiday season with you and your loved ones. We'll be back on January 7th, 2025. And today's episode's a little bit different. This is actually me being interviewed by somebody else. So I was a guest on the Sweet But Fearless podcast, sharing my story, sharing about my upcoming book called Bridging the Confidence Gap. So in the interview, you might hear me say Closing the Confidence Gap. We've actually changed it. The book is now called Bridging the Confidence Gap, and it's actually available for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble's and Indigo and every other book retailer globally. So make sure to get your pre-order copy, and you can get some pre-order bonuses to go along with it. But I hope you do enjoy today's episode where I am being interviewed. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to just shoot a message or email me. And again, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll be back on January 7, 2025. And here's the episode.
Welcome to the Sweet But Fearless podcast. With weekly guests as well as solo episodes, we showcase fearless women leaders and talk about how you can overcome, break through, and thrive in your career. We often say your career is not a linear journey. And understand that to build your own career path, it takes courage, determination, and resilience. And as a leader, you need to be stretching your knowledge and stepping outside of your comfort zone, because that is part of being fearless.
Hello, Sweet But Fearless Nation. I'm Mary Sullivan, one of the co-founders of Sweet But Fearless, and your host today. As we celebrate uplifting women and building a supportive community, we reflect on the need to ensure that we are taking care of our own health, wealth, and mental well-being so that we can be the best for ourselves and then for others. Learning new skills, sharpening behaviors, and being intentional with our learning is a unique journey for many of you, our listeners, and also our guests. We believe that by hearing others' journeys, you will find some nuggets of wisdom, some tips to help you get out of a rut, or some inspiration to help you believe that you are enough. Well, today our guest is Sheena Yap. She is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, keynote speaker, strategist, and award-winning podcaster, renowned for her expertise in elevating leadership and self-confidence through media. Sheena is also the founder and host of the acclaimed podcast, The Tao of Self-Confidence, where she interviews women about their journeys to self-confidence. With over 1 million downloads, her podcast ranks among the top 0.5% of most popular shows globally and features over 800 interviews. Well, I tell you, as someone who's in the top 1.5% with Sweet But Fearless, we hail to Sheena and look up to that. That is an amazing feat in itself, because that means that she is bringing top caliber interviewers to her podcast and having conversations that engage her listeners. Well, she not only does that in podcasting, she also had a debut book, The Tao of Self-Confidence, a guide to moving beyond trauma and awakening the leader within, and it was published by Wiley. It's a Wall Street Journal and Publishers Weekly bestseller. It's also recognized as one of the top 20 best self-confidence books of all time by Book Authority, the world's leading site for book recommendations. Her work has also been featured on prominent platforms such as Mindvalley, Fox, NBC News, and the Manila Times. I am so grateful that Sheena said yes and that she's joining us today. Thank you so much, Sheena.
Hey, Mary, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here today.
Well, very excited as a fellow podcaster and hopefully journalist someday, right? Or writer, author more. I really do appreciate it. And let's get right into it, Sheena. Tell us a little bit about how you got started on this journey and focusing on self-confidence.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. First off, I think everything really started with my upbringing, growing up in Toronto, moving to Toronto from the Philippines at the age of 7. I mean, it was quite of a culture shock, I love Toronto. I love that it's a very diverse and multicultural city. But growing up, I never had anyone that looked like me in the media. So I always felt ashamed, not feeling good enough, not feeling pretty enough because I didn't look a certain way. And I had to learn to overcome that in my 20s. And then 10 years, no, about almost 10 years ago, I was dealing with my own confidence issues. And I couldn't find any resources that really catered to Asian women. And part of me thought maybe something was wrong with me because I was the only one feeling this way, not feeling good enough, going through imposter syndrome, self doubt, fear, fearing what other people might think of me. And so I decided, I had to create something if I really wanted representation and support. And so I started the podcast, the Tao of Self-Confidence, just started interviewing women, just started building it. And today, like you mentioned, it's in the top 0.5% global podcast, which I never thought was something I could ever achieve. I just really wanted to have a platform. And from there, I've been able to write some books. So I have, the Tao of Self-Confidence. I have an upcoming book that's releasing next year, which is called Closing the Confidence Gap and how empowered women change the world. And I've also been speaking on this topic to organizations and corporations, and just being able to create a platform, have a voice, especially now in this world where it feels like, women are still in the back burner, just so many things happening. We definitely need to step up more, show up so that we can empower other women globally that, we have what it takes to be a leader, to share our voice, to even, there's even, countries in the world, some countries in the world where they can't even go to school or even have a voice. So we have to be that voice for them. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you so much, Sheena. So, let's go back to that, moving from the Philippines, growing up in Toronto and looking for that representation that obviously was lacking, right? But you created that. Tell us, how did you land on confidence as that core to really focus on? There could be many other things to choose, right? But you chose confidence. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I chose confidence just because it's something I dealt with personally, and I figured if I was dealing with it, there's other people dealing with it, and it's just we never talk about it. Especially growing up in Asian culture, we've been told never to make any noise, just stay in the background, just do as you're told, and so we've gone through so much heartache, so much issues, not being able to work through some of that, and going through trauma that we didn't even know existed. So it's a topic that I just chose because I knew it was something I was dealing it with, and I realized if I was dealing with this, then other people would be dealing with this. And so just being able to create that safe space, that open dialogue through the podcasts, and also being able to create the representation I desired, I just decided to do it. And it wasn't easy, of course, especially like as a woman, we tend to overthink, we tend to second guess ourselves. And I realized, if it's not me, who else is going to do it, right? We can complain about not having enough women in leadership, not having enough women um, in representation. And so I realized if I really wanted that, it had to start with myself.
Oh, I love that. And again, that's right, the epitome of confidence and having that self-confidence. So talk to us a little bit, Sheena, about, you say being fearless. You really feel that to have that confidence to overcome your fears, that's one of the key attributes. Give us some examples of that.
So when people say they're fearless, I have a different perspective on this just because, fear is something we all go through. Every person in the world fears something, right? And even celebrities, right? Even when they go on stage, they still fear it. Like Bono mentioned, he always still gets scared every time he goes on stage, but he also utilizes it to get the best performance ever. And so to me, being fearless is not about having fears. Being fearless is having that fear and doing it anyway, right? Because that's how we grow as a person. That's how we build courage and confidence is by pushing through those fears. Now, is it easy? Of course not, right? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, especially when we see this fear and like put it on this big pedestal thinking, "Oh my god, this is such a big big thing to conquer. How am I going to do this?" And so we just got to do it messy, right? Like there's no perfect time, there's no perfect moment. You just got to do it. Like one of the things I was always afraid of doing is video. Like creating a YouTube video, putting it out there was so nerve-wracking. Like I think I delayed doing a video for like almost a year before putting up my first like 2-minute YouTube video. And even then that took 2 hours to do because I was so scared. I was like fumbling. I would like record, stop, erase, do it again. So, conquering your fears isn't sexy. It's messy, it sucks. but once we push through that, once we move forward, like, then we build that confidence. It's like, oh my goodness, if I could conquer this, what else can I conquer? So, people are always like, what's the cure to fear? What's the cure to fear? It's really just taking action on it, pushing through it. And, there's no magic like answers. Like, we just got to learn to push through it, but you don't have to push through it alone. That's why we have resources like this podcast, books, coaches, strategists. There's people out there who can help you push through that, or communities, right? Especially when you see other people doing it and they're going through similar situations and you're like, okay, I realize I'm not the only one who goes through this. A lot of people go through this. And this is the problem. Nobody talks about these things. Like, nobody talks about the fears they go through, how it felt like, what they're feeling at that moment when they start even overcoming that fear, and then what it feels like after. So that to me is what being fearless is. It's feeling that fear and doing it anyway, pushing through it, because that's how you become more confident, more courageous, become stronger, and realize you're more capable than you think.
I love your definition of it, and I think that aligns very well with us at Sweet But Fearless when we were creating our business. Exactly, had a lot of that in mind about pushing through it versus saying, "It's a fear, let me avoid it and then spend my time over here," the things I'm not fearful. It was like, well, if that's a fear, and I'll give you an example, one was standing up in front of a room and teaching a class or doing a workshop, and I thought, well, I used to teach, but it was a group and it was kind of more that I was older than them, right? And I had authority. So, I felt a sense of confidence with that. That obviously I knew more than them, which of course we all know is wrong. But I had that level of confidence. But then going and teaching leadership workshops to your peers, many times now to those that are running major corporations, can put a fear in front. And the one way I use to overcome that, and Sheena, I bet you've done this with a lot of your individuals, is I found preparation. Just like you're saying, move through it. It can be messy. And I thought, it's okay to be messy. It's okay not to be perfect, but let me prepare and practice, practice, practice so that at least I know I'm giving my best. And if my best isn't good enough, that's okay right now. I can keep improving, but it's not going to be because I didn't prepare or I didn't, uh, think through some of the hurdles and then try and just attack them right on. So I love that thought that you have about fearless. And I think if everybody can add a little bit more of that courage and agreement to be messy, I like that too. Just be messy. So, Sheena, when you talk about that to groups, right, specifically leaders, and you're talking about self confidence, what are some of the questions that they may ask you, in these large groups or in these talks or in the preparation, right, when you're going to a large organization like NASA or Live Nation to talk to their leaders? What are some of the questions they have?
That's a great question. So, I mean, I still get a lot of questions about overcoming imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
being able to have the courage to ask. Because I think people don't realize, like, as women, we tend to just do the work, never do it, like, never make noise and just be okay, right? And then as women, we tend to wait for things to happen. I'm guilty of it too, right? I feel like if I wait, something will come along, but really you're just waiting, right? While men, they just go out there and do it. They don't care if they get a result or not. You just go for it. And because we do this, like, there's a huge confidence gap. It's the reason why I'm writing my upcoming book, because we're still feeling this gap, right, in all leadership forms. And so being able to have that courage to ask for the sale, ask for a raise, even if you get a no or you get rejected, at least it's better than not asking, right? Because we're gonna always ask, what if, what if, what if? Like, I remember when I worked in an office job, I was getting a salary review and my boss told me that, I was gonna get a raise from like 50,000 to 54,000. And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much." But I was wondering if you could actually, increase it to 55,000, because in Chinese culture, anything that ends in a 4 is actually a bad omen. Like, if you say it out in Chinese, it means death. And so my boss thought it was funny because he was like, "What?" And this is a big thing in Chinese culture. Like, you would rarely see any house numbers that has a 4 in it, because it's a bad omen. And so even though he laughed at it and thought it was ridiculous, he gave it to me, right? So just by asking, I increased it by 1,000, right? And I know 1,000 is not as much these days by the time taxes how, by the time you get taxes and things and inflation is like on the rise. But I mean, I was able to ask just because and giving them a valid reason, right?
That's right.
And men do that. Men ask all the time. They don't care.
All the time.
All the time. I get men asking all kinds of stuff, right? Like they don't care if they get a result. They don't care if they get ghosted. They're just okay with asking, right? So I always encourage the people to learn to ask, and of course, there's some people where you ask, and if you don't give a valid reason, of course, they're going to turn you down. But if you have if you wanna ask for something with a valid reason then they're more inclined to say yes. Like, if I just told my boss, "I want a $1,000 raise," right? An extra $1,000, he'd be like, "No, like, I already gave you a raise." But because I gave him a valid excuse, a reason, and he's like, "Okay, well, let me think about it." And so he gave it, right? Because to him, maybe $1,000 is not as much, right? And I mean, he can always find ways to increase that and then do something else. And also, if he respects his employees' traditions, then he's gonna do it, right? So, those are some of the things, of course, asking to build more confidence, what that feels like. And I know sometimes it's not always easy being in the office space because it's like you want to speak out, but at the same time, you get shunned or you're told, you're not supposed to. So there's always like these tricky situations. And I do my best to answer it because, of course, I don't know every single thing, right? Even being a person who studies confidence, who talks about confidence, I'm still learning as well. I'll probably know a little bit more, and I will always do my best to give the best answer, especially in difficult situations. And I think, writing the upcoming book was really important because we don't these are difficult topics that nobody ever talks about.
I would love to hear more about that trauma when it's financially based or when it comes from money. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I am not a trauma expert. So let's
Yeah.
yeah, I always want to make sure, like if you want help, there's people out there who are certified in that work. This is based on experiences, studies, other, people that I've spoken to, and also my upbringing, right? Growing up in Asian culture, I mean, we're told to never ask for help, never ask anybody for money, or like we tend to discount ourselves because we've always been devalued, right? And so there's a lot of trauma that comes out for it. Like if my aunt wanted me to babysit my cousins, she said she would pay me. And then my dad's like, how don't be so shameful and take the money, even though she offered it, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we feel bad because it's like, oh, am I being too greedy for taking it, even though she asked me to do it, she's willing to pay for it. There's
She
no
pays somebody else, right? She paid
somebody else. So
Yeah.
why not go to a family member? And so the shame carries a lot, right? And shame is not only in finance, it's in every aspect. And women get shamed for every single thing, even though they're not at fault, right? Even if you look at current world events right now, women are getting shamed even though they're victims of sexual assault, being shamed for speaking up, being shamed for, dressing a certain way, and, like, it's 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 terrible that this is still happening, which means we still have a lot more work to do. But yeah, like, I think shame is a big thing. How we see money is how we're taught to see money also stop hurts us, right? Like, especially growing up here, immigrating to a different country, my parents had to penny pinch every single thing, which I get, right? You come to a whole new country, you have to start your life all over again, and you have 3 kids to feed, and you have to figure everything out. Like, how are you going to make a life in this new world or new country? And sometimes our parents, grandparents, they're still living in that moment where they're like,
Yeah.
I just moved to this country, I still need to penny pinch. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you are more than comfortable. You can spend a little bit more. But, those things are what we remember, right? It's like, and it
Yeah.
can go either one way. Either you stay this, you're just as the same. You want to penny pinch everything, or you're the other extreme where you want to spend everything because you're so traumatized by penny pinching every single thing. Like, I'm not saying you need to blow your money away, and I'm not saying, you have to save every single penny, but there has to be a balance of both. I mean,
Mhm.
yes, you can save your money, but what if you're saving so much to the point you're not doing anything in your life? Then it's such a waste, right? You're
Mhm.
doing all this for what? What's that quality of life gonna look like? And of course, I don't want you to blow every single penny you have to the point where you're in debt and you're asking other people for money. right? There has to be a medium. And I think as, and women, we're not educated enough in that. Nobody talks about finance, fintech, financial education, and it's so important, right? I mean, I believe women should have their own money because of situations that we go through, right? Like, look at what's happening, like in Afghanistan. Women can't even go to school. Women aren't allowed to speak up in public. They can't even show their faces in public. I mean, they're not even allowed to sing in their own homes, right? Like what we think is a basic need is a luxury for others. So I think for me, like just seeing that, it just intensifies everything that I do. I realize this is not just about me, it's for every single woman out there who's still going through these things, right? Especially in Asia, there's still so many things that happen that nobody really talks about, like human trafficking, mail order brides. I mean, it's still a big issue, but it's not a trendy topic, so nobody talks about it.
Wow, that's a whole nother podcast.
I know.
And I would love to delve into that. Here in Seattle, I mean, it's breaking news at least every year about human trafficking. It's just, you know, disheartening, saddening, all of those words. But again, I do think the factor of money in women having their financial freedom, so many of our choices and our confidence is built upon that if we have enough money to do it. And when you ask people, well, why did you stay there in that relationship? Or why did you make this choice? Or why did you choose this career? Money, money, money is usually one of the top two of their reasons. And I agree, if we can help women in many ways get that confidence and get that financial freedom, then we can talk about choices, right? Then we can talk about truly having a choice, because a lot of women don't have choices, and I think I'm very privileged I have choices to make. So let's close out with, I want to make sure we talk about your book, Sheena, because it's amazing. And I really want our listeners and yours, of course, to learn and know more about not only what prompted you to write it, because I think we've been hearing a little bit about that, but what is it that you hope the readers get from the Tao of Self-Confidence? What is it that you hope they leave with after reading that book?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I mean, when I was approached to write this book, I didn't even really know if I wanted to write it because I was like, who am I to write a book about leadership? I don't even really know if I'm considered a leader. That's what I was asking myself. And so as women, we tend to do that, right? We tend to dismiss ourselves, discount ourselves, like lower our value. And when a publisher like Wiley approaches you with that, I mean, there has to be something there, right? Because they just don't pick
Exactly.
anybody. They do extensive research. They make sure like you are a credible person. So, yeah, at first I was really like, do I really want to do this? Am I really the right person? I'm sure there's somebody else out there. And I realized I needed to do this not just for me, but for other women out there. And so this book was really important because trauma is something we don't talk about. I feel like the whole world is traumatized right now, especially after the pandemic. And there's still a lot of healing we have to do. And I think my biggest thing is that I hope whoever the reader is, man, woman, Asian or not Asian, you have the courage to have these difficult conversations or be aware of the traumas that you have and find ways to heal from it. Because there's so many people out there who are not aware of their own traumas, and it's our trauma that's really holding us back. And I mean, I was guilty of it. I didn't realize how much trauma was affecting my life until, I did the work and realized, oh, like we could see it from two different perspectives. So, I mean, having that foundation is really important before you do anything else because then you become more clear and you're going to learn to take the necessary actions, right? Setting that foundation is really important. Instead of like, oh, you need to listen to positive audio every day, which you should. I'm not saying you're not, but I think you have to learn to do the actual work before doing all that.
That's great advice. I love that. Be aware and find ways to heal from it. So I think some people get stuck in the awareness
Yeah.
stage and don't progress, right, to finding ways to heal from it. And I love how you said earlier, there's experts out there, right? Find the experts in these fields to help us through whatever that trauma may be. And now tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, Sheen.
Yeah. So I have
What you can. I mean, I know, it's not out, but what
Yeah.
can you share?
For sure, for sure. So my upcoming book, it's called Closing the Confidence Gap, How Empowered Women Change the World. And, this book really came out of an article I read about from the World Economic Forum. They mentioned that gender parity is going to take at least 130 years
130 years.
to be achieved. So
That article.
yeah, so I was like, oh my goodness, like I don't know if I want to wait that long. And that's the minimum. And at this point, I feel like it's going to take longer.
Yep.
So this is a book about learning, what stops women from moving forward? What are some of the gaps that's contributing to this, right? How do we move forward? What can we do to build confidence? Or what are some of it's still kind of like setting that foundation, right? Like what's stopping us? Like imposter syndrome is really big. Nobody realizes how imposter syndrome really stops them from moving forward. Self-sabotage, different things like that. So really a guide for women to just kind of step up. One of the things I really talk about, whether it's, when I'm social media or in podcasts, is as women, we need to normalize self-promotion, right? Because we're so afraid to put ourselves out there. And I don't like it either. I don't like it. If I didn't have to do it, I wouldn't. But I realize I have to do it because there's so many women out there who's still scared about it, right? And especially if a woman who's doing her own thing, like you have to promote yourselves. How are people going to notice who you are, right? And I share different ways to do that without looking, tacky or whatever tacky looks like. We've always been conditioned that women who put themselves out there are considered tacky, but men do it all the time. Like men do it all the time. What makes it different, right? So we have to like dismantle some of these things, how women are viewed by society, and it's all in that book. So it's a little bit of a teaser. Um, I don't wanna have to wait 5 generations for gender parity to be achieved, right? And at the rate we're going, I feel like it's gonna take longer. Like, I just feel like it's taking longer right now. I feel like, there's just, like, so many things that's affecting women right now globally that we need to fix, right, on a bigger scale. And for me, when being a leader, like, as I know this may sound cheesy, right? Like, with great power comes with great responsibility, but it's so true, right?
True.
As women, we have to take our position seriously because first off, if one woman in leadership screws up, we all pay for it. We all pay for it. If a man screws up, it's just him, right? Meanwhile, as women, unfortunately, we all pay for it, right? We've seen that through, the story of Elizabeth Holmes, who one of
Mhm.
they're one of the most successful women in the VC and the tech world, and then, now, in jail for scamming a lot of people. But not every woman in the tech industry is affected by her one mistake. So, being a leader isn't about the glitz, the glamour, it's about creating the work, doing the hard work, stepping up when nobody seems to be stepping up, right? Or it feels I'm
Mhm.
not sorry. Let me rephrase. Stepping up, right? Even if it looks like you're the only one doing it. That's why I think this book is so important. Just having more women leaders, creating more women leaders, and there's amazing women leaders out there for sure. But we definitely need more. There's still a huge gap in every industry. Even if you look at the list of billionaires, like we still have a huge gap, right? And when women have more money, we are more willing to take care of everybody else. And there's been studies through that. So, yeah, that's a little bit about the book.
Well, I can't wait, and I believe every employee resource group is gonna be having that book and shared in all of corporate, not only corporate America, corporate Canada, and around the globe, really learning more about that. And I am gonna put a shameless plug, not only for your books, but also for the I Am Remarkable workshops were started by 2 women at Google who felt just what you're saying. They felt there was a lack of confidence and self-promotion from the women in their workplace, and they weren't getting the same level of promotions as the men were. And they put together this free workshop called I Am Remarkable. It's been for about 7 years now, and I've been a facilitator for almost 5. And what they do is help women around the world and other underrepresented groups through a 90-minute workshop, not only talking through the social norms that hold right us back, but also their own internal voice, right? The self-sabotage, the imposter syndrome, because it's not only internally, but it's also externally that holds a lot of individuals back from being promoted, from having that confidence, and from being able to self-promote. So I'm so glad about the work you're doing. And thank you so much, Sheena. And everyone, please, please follow Sheena on her social media. Pick up one of her books or both of her books and and find out if you can invite her to your company as a speaker and talk more about self-confidence and the leadership and in the workplace and the gender confidence gap. All of these through her training programs and her speaking engagements. We'll provide all of the links and we'll attach them in the show notes because we want to continue with our season of influence. Our goal at Sweet But Fearless is to help you sift through all of that noise and provide the information you need at your fingertips. So if you're sitting there thinking, I really want to improve my self-confidence, or I really want to offer this to my team, or I am mentoring someone and I think this could be a good book for them, take action now, right? Get started now, get on your journey. At our website, you can find multiple ways to engage with us through courses, e-learnings, and of course, links to others. We've created all of this with you at the center. We define success as helping you accelerate your career growth and bring clarity on your journey. We celebrate all of your talents and we applaud your courage. And remember, we are with you on this journey, sometimes in front, sometimes behind, but always by your side. So until next time, Fearless Nation.
Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of the Tao of Self-Confidence. You can order your copy of Asian Women Who Boss Up book by visiting our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits.